People are always amazed when they learn I gave a kidney to my mother. It was no big deal, I say. You would do the same. She gave me life. I just gave it back. My mother was diagnosed with kidney failure suddenly and unexpectedly in 2001, after struggling for months with high blood pressure that her doctor was unable to control. She needed dialysis immediately to have a machine do what her kidneys no longer could, rid her body and blood of toxins and excess fluid. I remember looking with childlike horror as she was dialyzed the first time in that cold, sterile hospital room. She looked like a mummy wrapped in layers of thin white blankets to keep her warm as tubes pumped blood in and out of her body. Her eyes were tightly shut, as if in pain. Maybe she was. Maybe she was also trying to escape this terrible new reality. She was now dependent on a machine to live. 3 days a week, 4 hours each time. This was how she'd survive unless she got a kidney transplant. Suddenly, my active mother was so frail, so ill, so depressed. It was horrible seeing her this way, this active artist and animal advocate who took care of her horses and llamas, tended to rescue ducks and other pets at the home where I grew up. My beautiful mother, who loved and adored me and amazed and inspired me throughout my life. She got my sister and I into competitive figure skating, and me into riding and showing our horses. She taught me respect for nature, down to the tiniest spider. Don't kill that, she'd say. It's not hurting anybody. She broadened our worlds. She took my father to find her grandfather's home in a tiny village in Scotland, and later to see the unique wildlife on the Galapagos Islands. She took my sister to Costa Rica to help researchers tag sea turtles, and took me to the rainforest of Borneo to work with endangered orangutans. She wanted us to pursue our dreams, but she also honored her own. A former social worker, my mom nearly finished her Master of Fine Arts degree while we were growing up. She wanted us to really live life, and now I wanted that for her. People say they exist more than they live on dialysis. I saw that for myself as my mother withered away over 2 years, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. She ended up in the hospital so often my father and I stopped keeping track. I once spent an entire night with her in an emergency room because too much fluid had built up in her lungs. By morning, she was literally drowning, gasping for breath in an oxygen mask as her doctor called some code and urgently wheeled her into the ICU himself. I felt so hopeless so often, helpless so often. But I wasn't entirely helpless. I could give her a kidney. I could not see her surviving the wait in Michigan, which was 5 years on average for a kidney. And I'd already learned so much about this amazing vital organ from my father, a retired pathologist. He would draw diagrams late at night after long, exasperating, and nerve-wracking hospital days with my mother in the hospital, explaining the various roles of this organ. I also learned that while we have 2 kidneys, I could live quite well with 1. I would be at no greater risk of getting any kidney disease, and if I did, I would fare as well as if I had 2. This sounded almost too good to be true. I was actually excited. I did feel pressure, though, never from my father or my mother, who felt guilty taking a daughter's kidney. I was her only chance. I had no backup. The family and friends who considered being donors did not work out. What if her body rejected my kidney? What then? And so on May 19, 2003, 13 years ago this month, I went into surgery, my mother following a few hours later at the University of Michigan. Miraculously, I was not nervous as I laid on the gurney, my IV prepped just before they wheeled me in. Surrounded by my parents and my husband in those tense moments before, I saw the worry in my mother's face, and I so wanted to soothe her. I smiled at her and half joked to the doctor to make sure my kidney went nowhere but inside my mother's body. We were lucky. I gave my mother new life that day, a life more like the one she knew as an active, independent person, once again tending to her animals and exhibiting her art. Although I lost my mother in September 2012, I was so thankful she never had to go on dialysis again. As for me, I'm great. In fact, my life is better having done this. She gave me life, I just gave it back. To be able to do that for her, that to me was the most amazing thing.